All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome for another discussion of Rings of Power. This will be episode 5, which is called Partings. And I am joined here for the discussion by my excellent friend and nemesis, Dr. AP Canavan. Hello, AP. How are you today?
I am doing very well, Philip. Although, in a true Tolkienian style, we really should have changed our names. Every time that we appear as a nemesis, we should be in disguise. And so we
Yes,
should have completely different names for these things.
we should indeed. Our secret. Of course, you would have the secret evil name. I would have the secret good name, right?
When will people ever learn it's the silver-tongued devil in you that is
Ah,
lying to everyone? Appears fair, but is foul. That's the lesson that everyone needs to learn.
that's a Tolkien lesson, indeed. Yeah. So, well, there are four threads, essentially. All four threads get into this episode, and one being the Harfoots, the return of the Harfoots after not seeing them in episode 4. And of course, we had the Southlands, and that's the stuff going on with Arondir and uh,
Bronwyn.
Adar and Bronwyn and all of that. And then we have Numenor with Galadriel and Elendil and Miriel, etc. And we also have, of course, Elrond and Durin, and they have moved on from Khazad-dûm to Lindon now, where they have some very interesting encounters. So let's, if you don't mind, let's start with the Harfoots, and I'd love to get your impressions of this thread from episode 5.
Well, overall, I loved the episode.
Mm.
And I know there's been some discussion online about, oh, I hit the. I really love this episode. And when we get to that section, I'll explain why, because I think I know the reason why a lot of people dislike it. But
Hmm.
I love this episode. But the Harfoot storyline, this has been really interesting because one of the things, as we saw them journeying, I had initially assumed that they were going to be heading west towards where basically the Shire ends up being. But actually, they're heading east and south. So
Mm.
they're getting closer to the Southland storylines. And we
Southlands.
see that transition across the landscape was actually really nicely handled, transitioning between the map and the New Zealand landscapes. So we got those very sweeping shots that Jackson
Mm.
really went in for on the movie adaptation.
Right.
And so it's locating it in a visual language that everyone associates with Tolkien. But one of the things that they did that I thought was really, really clever is the camouflage on the Harfoot little caravan things that they have.
Yeah.
They changed it as they moved through the different landscapes to match with the different vegetation. And
Clever
in one of the
Harfoots.
shots,
Yeah.
in one of the shots, we can see Nori and Poppy and that little group. And then in the far background, way off in the distance, you can actually see the rest of the Harfoot caravan that
Ah.
they're quite far behind, but they're still following. And little moments like that, the attention to visual detail. I
Mm.
don't think anyone, with the exception of, daggers that appear and disappear, but usually the visual detail in this show has been so well thought out and so well done. And I really, really enjoyed that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
the CGI of the wolves, where they were kind of a cross between wolves and boars to give
Oars.
them that
Yeah.
sort of fantasy look.
Yeah.
And again, you can see how scary those things are to the hobbits because they're tiny and these things are the same height as them. And
Yeah.
yet we had a brilliant scene where Nori, like they're in the little tree, and Nori is trying to get the branch to fight them, and suddenly
Yeah.
the stranger unleashes magic.
Yeah.
So while I hoped against all hope that this was going to be one of the blue Istari, I and I really wanted it to be one of the blues.
They
I
never
think it's going
show
to end
up.
up.
They never show up.
I think it's going to end up being Gandalf, and I'll be a little bit disappointed, but it's developing interestingly so far.
I have to admit, I'll be disappointed if the stranger turns out not to be Gandalf at this point, because I'm really enjoying the interaction between the stranger and Nori, particularly. There's a development there. There's a bond that's forming there, and it's a bit fragile still because you do see a sort of back and forth where there's an increase in trust, and then something happens with it because he clearly still has no control over the power that he's been put in a flesh form. And it's safe to say that if he's not a Lauren slash Gandalf, then he must be some one of the Maya, right? I mean, he has to
Mm-hmm.
be. But regardless, he's not used to being in a body, and he still has very little control over this power that has somehow been put inside this flesh. And so when it erupts, when he's afraid, he's protecting Nori and Poppy from the wolf boar warg things. It's really, he hurts himself, when he hits the earth and it pushes them back. And it's a cool bit of CGI and magic there. I thought that was really neat. But he didn't know probably what he was doing when he did it. And then when he did it, he actually really hurt himself. And later we see a different kind of magic where he is presumably intentionally healing himself, although that also seems to kind of be a little out of his control when Nori comes in and she's scared for him. It's frightening to her. Whether or not he's completely in control of this healing process with the cold, right, which is healing him from the burn of the power that erupted from him before. He hasn't learned how to control this power in this form yet. And so Nori's, it gets frozen on her hand, and then he kind of explodes, maybe in fear because maybe he's in this other place, he's in a meditation, whatever, and he realizes he's hurting her, and it frightens him. And of course that frightens her. And so there's this little bit of a push and pull when it comes to the relationship here. But I felt very affectionate about it. I felt like there's a genuine, I feel invested in this relationship between the stranger and Nori particularly, and between him and the Harfoots in general. I find it to be very effective for me, that I'm enjoying this part of the series very much.
Interesting. The fact that he uses quite ostentatious magic is something I'm a wee bit iffy on, because Tolkien always treated magic as much more numinous, much more ethereal, much almost a liminal space between the seen and the unseen. That like Gandalf made fireworks, or lit pine cones and then threw the pine cones. He wasn't creating a fireball.
He also had a nightlight on the end of the staff.
Yeah, he created light, or he made when the waters of the ford crashed down, he made the top of it appear as riders on horses.
Yeah.
None of that was, casting these big force spells or anything that was big and ostentatious. So I think this is sort of turning Tolkien and adapting it more for the modern audience who expects magic to be much more visible, much more active. Whereas I think Tolkien, particularly if you think of the elves, like, yes, they were magical and had this powerful magic, but it was all about growth and healing and preserving. It wasn't, I cast magic missile. And so I think the modern audience wants more magical displays, and they're trying to do that as softly as they can without distancing themselves too far from Tolkien's sort of idea of what magic was. Because witchcraft was very different. Witchcraft, the evil form of magic, was much more ostentatious. It was more about that casting of spells.
Right.
So I'm slightly uneasy about how visible and ostentatious the magic was.
Yeah.
And again, I still liked it. It was cool looking, but it drifted a little too far away from my comfort level for Tolkien's work. I had the same reaction when in Jackson's adaptation we had Saruman and Gandalf having the force fight.
Yeah.
I vehemently disliked that. But one of the things I thought was nice in the Harfoot storyline, because it tied very neatly into a sort of a theme of what is a leader that we see in a lot of the other storylines.
Yeah.
Because we have Sadok basically being questioned what to do about these people following them, with Nori and Poppy.
Malva particularly is sort of
Malva saying, you should have taken their wills and left them behind. And because they're going to endanger all of us. And we see that balance of being king that is offered to Halbrand. We'll talk about that later on. But that's seen very much as a privilege. Whereas we see it from the perspective of, but there's a cost to it. It is service to the people. You have to make the difficult decisions. And that's something that's explored in the Southlands storyline and it is
Very
discussed in the
much.
Numenorian storyline. And it ties so neatly together because again, the Elven storyline is about Gil-galad and Elrond and the
Mhm.
responsibilities of leaders and their people. And so that's a thread that's worked all the way through about being a leader, being a king, being someone in charge. Yes, you get all of this prestige, but it also comes with responsibilities.
Mhm.
And I liked that that never drifts too far away from focus. That the writers were keeping a very close eye on how leaders act and what their motivations are and what the costs are for those.
Yeah, absolutely. And responsibility as well, and even within that, particularly in addition to Sadok Burrows, you have the stranger who's trying to figure out how to deal with the power that is in him. And even you're right that it's a much more visual, visible unleashing of power than you would see in the Lord of the Rings, particularly from Gandalf. But you might even say, well, he was young then and he didn't know how to contain it, and or something. I don't know, but yeah, but I think you're right that basically for a modern audience they want to see some effects, right? So and you have all this wonderful CGI, so it would be a shame if it were relegated to a flashlight on the end of a staff. So but I really did enjoy this thread. Actually, I would have been happy even with more of the Harfoots in this episode. And they do leave it a little ambiguously with Nori being sort of swept away there as she's trying to help the stranger, and then running away from him because this is again this is a bit of trust forms, and then something happens to scare them, and there's a little bit more trust, and then so there's a lot of this back and forth in this episode, I think, too, as it's setting things up. But
And particularly that sequence where Nori becomes frightened because of the spell freezing her hand, and then
yeah,
the stranger trying to comfort her, and she runs away because she is scared by this level of power.
right.
The transition then to the cloaked figures who appear to be some sort of priesthood
Mm,
looking at the impact site where the stranger came down, and
yeah,
there's very ominous music playing, and on the back of the sort of the shield disc thing that they had, the constellation is marked,
yeah.
and so there's this strange thing, and they are human, they had human ears at least, so I'm assuming they are human,
They're little scary looking humans, but yeah,
but they had all the appearance of a priesthood, and you go,
yeah.
oh, a priesthood, and this is where we're built again, a lot of this is building up to Sauron as being worshipped, and you go,
Mm,
what's going on here? So like there is a sinister sort of ominous aspect to all of this that
yeah.
again is intriguing and interesting.
Yeah, yeah, they seem to be still kind of teasing us a bit, like you think it's Gandalf, but there are some really shadowy hints here, something sinister going on. So yeah, and they've been doing that from the beginning. Like I think there's plenty of theories about who this could be, and some people thought it might be Sauron, and some, you know. So I think we can ditch that one safely.
Yeah.
And like you, I'm pretty convinced it's Gandalf, but I kind of like how they are showing a kind of fear of power here. And this goes along with some of the bigger themes that we've been talking about in the series, such as power and its relationship to pride, and how power is used or abused. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's interesting, and you see the stranger learning, oh, if I use this too much, it hurts the innocent and weaker people around me, and you can see it hurts him. He doesn't want to be. Even there's that scene where he's learning to speak from Nori. I love that scene where he's learning to speak, and I forget the word, peril. It's peril, right? And he's like, am I a peril? Is that what I am? And she's, no, 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 you're not peril, you're good. And it's, oh, I'm good. Oh, okay. It's like this ancient being is learning wisdom from this little Harfoot, and it's delightful, and it fits with what we know to be a major theme in Lord of the Rings as well. So
Mhm. It's a nice relationship, and the Harfoots are walking a line because sometimes they're providing sort of the comic relief for the show, but
mhm.
also they are still part of this world. They are still part of this story, and that story is filled with peril. So this was actually a nice way to transition into that more serious. That they're not just gallivanting around and dancing jigs in the woods.
Yeah.
That it it does bring it down into the reality of the rest of Middle Earth. So
Yeah.
that I thought that was nice. I thought it was well done.
And in fact, they are heading toward peril, toward the Southlands, as you pointed out. So we can talk about that thread now, I think. So, what are your general impressions of what's going on in the Southlands with Arondir and Bronwyn and company?
Um, well, the what is the name of that guy? Is it Walder? What was the
Do I have that one written down? It's close. You're close.
Waldrig?
Waldreg. Yeah,
Waldrig.
yeah,
So them being holed up in the Elven watchtower,
yeah,
and Bronwyn gives the stereotypical trope heavy, stirring speech to the people, and we're going to defend. And we have that, and oh yes, we're going to do it. And then Waldrig speaks up with what are you talking about? No, we're and immediately undercuts it. And it's this
yeah,
wonderful playing with the expectation of, well, of course the men are going to rise up and fight evil. And you go, no, it's the Southlands. They used to serve Sauron. And it so neatly shows that
mm,
divide, that split of loyalties, that men are, in Tolkien's world, were weaker than elves, that they had this darkness in them, that we have been told by the elves. It's not just that their ancestors once served Sauron, it's who they still are now.
mm-hmm,
And we see that darkness, that is such a strong element of all of this, that they don't have this moral fortitude, that they are, and the decision that Waldrig is making is, well, we want to survive. Therefore, we will keep surviving. We will serve evil if it means that we survive.
right,
And you can see how he's convinced himself, because he doesn't want to serve under the elves. Oh, the elves are these horrible people who basically just left them alone. And yeah, they walked around and they were guards, but they were pretty much left to live their lives. And he pledges himself to Adar, thinking it's Sauron,
mm-hmm,
calls him Sauron, which is an elvish word for it's abhorrent or abhorred, or I always forget the translation. But
not a
it's
nice
basically a
compliment.
nasty name to call someone. Um, and it doesn't go well.
Yeah,
But you can see that he's willing to pledge allegiance to a Dark Lord when he was bristling under the authority of the elves, who were kind of just aloof and standoffish and assholes. But they kind of just let him get on with his life.
mm,
And now he's pledging allegiance to a Dark Lord. And the first thing that Adar says is, right, you're going to go and kill this kid.
yeah. And he's
Uh,
conflicted about it, but he's going to do it. So, yeah,
but there was that nice moment of Arondir speaking to Theo and trying to teach him about the bow.
yeah, I
And
like
Arondir going, yeah, it took me 200 years to get this brave. And
Yeah,
you're here now.
yeah,
And that is a point that gets emphasized, not only there, but when Arondir is speaking to Bronwyn, he says, because she said half of the people left, he goes, but half stayed.
yeah,
And it emphasizes that duality of man that Tolkien always had running through, that man could be capable of the most noble things, but also of the most base. And I thought it was neatly done. I
mm-hmm,
think at the end, that sort of confrontation of Bronwyn despairing, and again,
right, right.
hope and despair and what you will do to survive. These are all questions running through this episode, because we see a lot of that in the discussion with Gil-galad and Elrond.
And in Numenor
That,
as well. Yeah,
and in Numenor, that again, that theme is being picked up in each of the different storylines.
right.
So in some respects, like some of the writing here is actually very good. It's thematically linking a lot of this stuff,
Mm-hmm,
which
mm-hmm.
is a sign of good writing.
Even within an individual character like Bronwyn, for example, you do have someone who is lifting the heavy load, trying to get people together, trying to organize them, and have some kind of resistance. But then as you pointed out, she gives into despair there for a while and says, "No, this is who we are. It's hopeless. What are we going to do?" And then Arondir has to sort of take up the torch of motivating them to stay the course and to resist. So even within an individual like Bronwyn, you have hope and despair wrestling with each other, and that's good character work when you have conflict built into a particular character. So that is good. Yeah.
And it was interesting with the sword that there was that carving, and Arondir
Ancient
refers to
key.
the sword
Yeah.
as a key. Now, I'm
Yeah.
a bit confused about this, but if we tie it to what Adar said earlier, uh,
Uh-huh.
because testing the orc's arm in the
His
sunlight, where
arm.
he can
Yeah.
stand and the orc is burning like an Irish person on a beach. Um, that one of the things that Sauron does for his plans is he sets off the volcanic eruption, which casts ash and dirt and cloud
Creates
and smoke into the
Mordor,
air.
essentially. Yeah.
But it blankets the area in cloud to block out the sun.
Right. For
And
the orcs. Yeah.
and this seems to be something that is happening soon.
Yeah.
And if we think of this movement towards Celebrimbor had said, we need this built by spring, that there was some sort of timetable involved here
Oh,
that we're
you might
seeing
have
be.
your answer. You might have your answer. Hmm.
Um, and if this is a key, is this the way that Sauron is going to activate the volcano? I don't know, but it sort of feels like it could fit like that.
Ah,
So I'm wondering, is that that's why they need it? It's going to set off the volcano, which will allow the orcs to roam around without being burned,
yeah.
and they won't need to hide from the sunlight.
No more sunscreen for those orcs. Yeah. So that makes sense. It's a good conjecture, I think. Solid conjecture, and it brings several of the threads together in an interesting way. If the sword hilt turns out to be a key of some sort that allows this process of the volcano spewing and becoming this, or if it's somehow linked to the power necessary to make that happen,
Yeah,
some way or
I
another.
don't know, but it seems to fit, and that's what I've noticed with this is they've put in a lot of groundwork where these pieces they haven't told us directly what the pieces are doing yet, but
Mm,
they all seem to fit together in various ways. And I think the Elven storyline particularly is one of the big missing pieces that we needed, and I think there'd
right.
be a big revelation about that in the upcoming episodes. But again, I have speculations about that, about how it all fits together.
We'll talk about that when we get to that final thread with Elrond and Durin, because you have an idea that is very much linked to the idea of this key, and it has to do with the character of Celebrimbor, particularly.
Mm.
So we'll get to that, but it's all linked together, as you're saying. I do feel like there's been a lot of setup work in this episode, particularly, and I am looking forward to the next episodes picking up the momentum from this. And I feel like things are in place now, and we're because there are 8 episodes, I believe, right, in the season, and this is season or episode 5. So I
I
feel like
can't
we're
remember if there are 8 episodes or 10, but the weird thing is people seem to think that nothing is happening, but each time there's been progression, there's been movement, there's been
yeah,
something that's been introduced and then developed. Like the previous episode, we had right, we're gonna go and have to help the men of the Southlands. Then this episode
right,
in Numenor, it's these are the preparations because you don't just go right, well, everyone on the boats.
right.
It's they made the decision. We have an episode of them getting ready, and by the end of the episode, they leave. And you go, that's literally 2 episodes. Make the decision and leave. That's fairly quick progression. And yet people seem to think that, well, once you make the decision, you just send the army out. You go, what army? If they had done it that way, you would have gone, oh yeah, but they just had an army sitting around that were just going to go and do that. That you're skipping over
Right.
how was it all organized. And there was really nice progression in the Numenorian storyline. We get
Yeah.
much clearer ideas about Pharazon's end goals and why he is supporting the war.
His motives. Yeah. Yeah.
Because, yes, ostensibly on the face of it, yes, we're going to support the war effort and we're going to support Muriel and his son going, I can't believe you take orders from an elf. And Pharazon's, by the time this is over, the elves will be taking orders from us.
That
We're
was
going to go to
scary.
these lands. We're
Yeah.
going to conquer. We're going to have new trade. We're going to have new resources. We're going to have new markets. Uh, this is all about personal ambition for Farazan.
Yeah.
And it is nothing whatsoever to do with saving the Southlanders.
No, no,
It's
no.
all about the grandeur and expansion of Numenor. Again, pride at the very center
Yeah.
of what Farazan is doing. The downfall of Numenor, this pride and hubris. And that is made very clear in this episode. And Muriel wanting to do the right thing, thinking, get Galadriel out of Numenor, and we'll do this thing, and that'll save Numenor.
Right.
And her father, Tar Palantir, who is the seer, is still seeing the fall of Numenor because it's
Yeah.
not Galadriel that's the problem. It's Farazan, and they can't see the danger closest to them. They can't see how the good intentions are going to be corrupted and twisted
Yeah.
by Sauron, which that is the big thing about Sauron. Sauron in the history of Middle Earth is more like a seducer. It's
Right.
all about twisting
It can be
the
quite
pure
quite
emotion.
persuasive and charismatic. Yeah. And it's interesting too,
Um,
because Farazan is more that way. He's presented as a politician essentially here. And if you know the character in the Silmarillion, you're like, wait, how do they get from this politician to that? And I'm beginning to see, okay, I see where how he's getting to that in this episode. I'm not going to say what that is because it would be a spoiler for people who haven't read the Silmarillion, but you know what I mean. Farazan becoming the character that you recognize in the Silmarillion. You can see that it's within him now, and that he's sort of like a robber baron or or something like that. But yeah,
but also where he talks about, you don't fight the tide. You see where it's going to take you, and you
uh-huh.
use that to constantly advance yourself. That
Yeah,
he is a populist who is manipulating the people. He
right,
pretends to be a man of the people. He
right.
displays all of the guild badges. Oh, I'm one of you. Oh, look at these hands that have worked. He hasn't worked a day in his life. He's paid off guilds to get the badges.
Oh
He
yeah,
has this he has this
which he
whole
wears
position.
very prominently. Right. Yeah.
And it's all about this display of being a man of the people. But look at him. He doesn't work. He's sitting around eating the best food, manipulating people, going, oh, it's you talk to the little people. Because that's how you get your power. Like we've seen this time and time again when we've been in Numenor. He's constantly manipulating people. He's
Right.
friends with what was it, Tamar, the rabble rouser
Yeah.
guilds.
Tamar. Yeah.
Like they're clearly in cahoots. He's a plant that Farazan
Right.
uses. And
Right.
you go, Farazan is all about self-aggrandizement. He
Right.
wants to be in control. He
Exactly.
wants power, but he doesn't want it to raise Numenor up. He wants it to profit for himself.
Yes. So exactly what you were talking about with this theme of leadership, rather than seeing leadership as self-sacrifice, as a service of helping other people. In this case, it's what can I get out of this? How it's about me. It's all me, me, me. And he's very much a probably a narcissist and possibly a sociopath, but very much willing to manipulate and hurt in order to aggrandize himself. So, yeah.
And it ties very neatly into both Halbrand and Galadriel in
Yep.
in this episode. Because
Yep.
Halbrand starts off going, stop trying to manipulate me. I don't want to do this. And you get a real sense that not only is he an oath breaker, that he had fled service to maybe Adar or Sauron, but
Yeah.
he has fled service. That's why he was on that boat. He was fleeing the Southlands, and now he's going to have to go back. But he has to make that decision, and he seems to be all about, no, I just want to live my life. I'm all about me. I'm all about being selfish and doing what's good for me.
Mm.
And Galadriel talks him round. And at the end of the episode, he is standing like Aragorn. He is
Hmm.
standing there going, I will be a king to my people. I will do the right thing. And whoever it was that commented on on one of your videos saying that they think Halbrand's going to end up as the king of the army of the dead, of the Oathbreakers.
The Oath
I think
Breakers.
that is absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
He he wants to be the good king,
Right.
but he is weak, he is flawed, he is not strong enough, and he is already breaking his oath. He's already breaking oaths. So I think that's already being seeded that he wants to do this,
Yeah.
but lacks the
They
strength for
they do a great job of capturing that tension within him visually in the scene where he's summoned to the council where they're ultimately going to make the decision, are we going or not? And he's in the smithy and he's just been told to leave and go there to the council, and he takes his the symbol of his kingship and he rips it off himself and he slams it on the table, and we think, oh no, he's not going to go along. He's going to make the selfish choice. And they show just that symbol on the table there, and he leaves. And then suddenly a hand grabs it and comes back. And the next scene is with him in the armor. And we know, oh, he did the right thing. But you still get a sense that there's some tension in him, that there's conflict within him about this whole thing. And he's very much back and forth here.
And of course, that ties directly into the Southland story about men have the ability to be good or
Yep.
to be base. That it's this divide in the race of men. And so I
Yep.
thought that was really well done. In fact, when we see the whole sequence with Galadriel fighting with the trainee soldiers, which I thought
Mm,
was a really fun sequence, just showing
yeah.
how,
Yeah.
an elf who has trained for 500 years fighting
Thousands.
is
Yeah.
clearly going to outmatch everyone. And like they're really trying to hit her, they're really trying to do damage, and she's swatting them on the bum and all those sorts of things. And it's a bit of a laugh, but it's a learning exercise for them as well. But when she gets that small cut to her arm,
Right.
she grants she says, no, you get the reward because you did the thing that we promised.
Congratulations, Lieutenant.
And they pronounce it the correct way.
The weird way. Where's the
The
F in that
correct.
word? Where's the F in the lieutenant?
Ask Tolkien. Um, But that was all like a really nice thing. And in the background of that scene, Halbrand is standing in the forge watching. And it's little attention to details like that. You go,
There's your
there,
forge again.
there, A, the forge keeps coming up, but also B, sometimes you can see that the writing and the directing is so spot on. And then they have a couple of lines in it that,
Yeah, there are a few bad lines in there. Yeah.
firstly, let me go through this because they did annoy me. Um, uh, People come in to see Halbrand and they go, you have some visitors. It then cuts to Halbrand entering the council chamber. You go,
Huh.
no, that's not that he has visitors. He has been summoned. Like, it is literally the opposite of what you just said. So
Right.
whoever wrote that line of dialogue needs to be poked. Then we have, oh, the horse, the horse master recruited the horse, Isildur's horse. You go, you don't recruit a horse. Commandeered, requisitioned.
Requisition. Yeah.
You know, you don't recruit. He didn't go up going, "Come on, horsey, do you want to join the army?"
I'll give you a carrot.
Why? Why on on Middle Earth are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
And I think there was one other one. Oh yeah, when Isildur is apologizing to his friends, he said, "I'm sorry, I started that fight."
He
What
didn't really.
fight? He
Yeah.
let go of a rope and got them all kicked off. That was the problem. What fight?
Yeah.
Was this a deleted scene somewhere? I'm just going, why?
Yeah.
And yet, despite that, when you think of the transition, and when Elrond is looking up at the stars, looking up at his father's star in the
Yeah.
sky, wondering what he should do, and it transitions back to Numenor of the statue of Elrond's father with his
Hmm.
hand outright, you go, you have writing like that that links the things so well together. You go,
Yeah.
why are there these dumb lines of dialogue?
Well, there's a lot of thought put into it, at least we can say that. And they're paying attention to the themes, and they're very Tolkienian themes indeed. So,
But Galadriel is a very important part of the Numenorian storyline here.
absolutely. Yeah.
And there are two major things I think we should pick up from this. And the first is in the previous episode, we saw Galadriel sort of coming to the realization that she hasn't been treating the Numenorians as people, that she's been treating them as enemies.
So light
And she
bulb goes
still
off. Ding.
and she is wrestling with that. And
Yeah.
we see the admission here, the self-realization that she is the problem. She can't stop. That Elrond has had to try to stop her. Gil-galad
Right.
has had to try to stop her.
That's right.
Everyone is
Yeah.
trying to stop her, to save her from herself. And these are the breaking down of all of that pride, hubris, arrogance that she had. And it's a process. And we see it. She has these realizations now. And this is the beginning of the path to wisdom. This is the path to Galadriel becoming the Galadriel of the Third Age that we see in Lothlorien.
The Kate Blanchett Galadriel. Yeah. I
And
love
when
that
she,
too. Sorry, I was just gonna say I love the scene you pointed out before, where they have her mock fighting and she's mock, but they're kind of serious. It shows us a playful side of her. We're getting those the other sides of her, and the relationship, as we pointed out before, with Hallbrand is very much humanizing her, and he's teaching her along the way too, about her perceptions and her rigidity, and we're seeing that start to chip away here a bit, I think. So I like that.
and I think those exchanges, if you think of what her life has been like for the last, say, 500 years, she has
Right.
been fighting and fighting and fighting. She went horse riding one week. She has been talking to people. She's been fighting with people here, but it's not life and death. It's
Right.
fun. And she's suddenly realizing there is more to life than her mission. And
Yeah.
this is allowing her that insight. And I know not everyone agrees with how they have created the character of Galadriel, but
Hmm.
I actually think they set that foundation up, and now we can see the whole transition. We can see this whole path that she is on. That it seems so clear and so well done that okay, maybe you don't like it, maybe you don't like the decision they made with the adaptation. That is absolutely fine, but
Right.
this actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And seeing these moments break down, and then this moment where she is wearing the armor and she
Mm.
steps up onto the ship. And I remember back when the trailers had been shown, and there were a number of Tolkien purists online decrying the fact that Galadriel would never wear armor with the star of Elendil on it, or
Numenorian armor.
Erendil,
Yeah.
because
Arendelle. Yeah.
Erendil, she would never wear that armor. But of course, she's in Numenor.
Yeah, has to
That's the
borrow
armor
some
they
armor.
have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would have armor to fit elves because it was probably just sitting around somewhere
Yeah.
for hundreds or thousands of years. And that's where she gets the armor from. So now that actually
Makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
And something that was perceived as the writers weren't paying any attention to the lore, you go, no, they were paying attention to the lore. This
Right.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And you can see a lot of these things were misapprehensions about what the writers were doing. We didn't have all of the information, and we were making guesswork on this is different too, instead of looking to see what they were doing. And I
Right.
think now that we're seeing what they're doing, we actually see that a lot of this is very, very consistent.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it pays to give a story a chance, right?
What you mean? You don't write it off after the first couple of chapters?
Or even before you start engaging with it.
Judging a book by its cover, none of us would do that.
Never, never, never. So anything else in Numenor we should touch on?
Um,
There was, Isildur's something that you mentioned, and I think it's a very perceptive point, and it's a premonition in a way. If you know, okay, a bit of a spoiler for Lord of the Rings, Isildur's future is particularly his relationship with the ring, and how we see a young Isildur here who is both wanting to do the right thing, has a good heart, but also is ambitious and wants to prove himself and wants to be the hero. And that kind of makes sense with the man that we know he becomes and the particular thing he
jewelry
does.
he likes to wear.
Yeah, the jewelry he favors at a later time. So yeah, I think that anything you want to say about that? I thought that was a good point.
The speech between him and his father, where
Yeah.
his father goes like, "You might want to do this, but all of these other people have proven their service. You haven't." Isildur has given up on everything. Anytime it got difficult, anytime there was something else that he wanted to do, he went and did it. It's a point his friends make, his
Mm,
father makes, that
mm,
Isildur, he has his head in the start. He wants to do the right thing, but when push comes to shove, he swans off and does something else that he would want to do instead. That
right.
he's not always dedicated to service. And again, that goes to this idea of leadership. And
Mm,
even then, when he gets on the boat after finally being awarded this position, and everyone goes, "Oh, so your father did get you in?" And then
mm,
his father goes, "Yeah, you're sweeping out the stables, like you're." And his friends all laugh at him. And Isildur, for a moment, is absolutely indignant and annoyed and angry.
yeah.
And then he laughs. And then he goes, "Oh, yeah, you know." But you see that pride, that anger. How dare you treat? I am better than a stable hand. He thinks so highly of himself. He thinks that he is so special.
Mm.
And this again, it's
Or he
that
wants
fact.
to be special. I think it's more like he wants to be. That
Um,
he's eager to prove himself special, but he isn't there. So
yeah,
yeah,
but it's that fine line between
yeah.
having self-respect and self-aggrandizement. That
Hmm.
learning to balance those things. And I think Isildur again, the same thing that we see in Halbrand, the same thing that we see in the Southlands
Yeah.
storyline.
They're fragile. They're human. They're conflicted. Yeah.
So I thought that was very well done. But I think this really takes us on to what had to be my favorite, hands down, favorite sort of section of the show, which was in Lindon.
With Elrond and Durin and of course Gil-galad and everything else going on there, and the really clever, there's some clever dialogue going on there and some clever little tricks and things going on. So yeah, it's interesting. So what did you like about that thread the most?
Well, well, first of all, talking about dialogue, I complained about some of the lines of dialogue earlier.
Yeah.
When you watch that scene of Durin, Elrond, and Gil-galad at the table, first of
At
all,
the
the whole
table.
thing about the table really well played. Like
Very
that was
nice.
an excellent setup and it had an excellent payoff.
Durin
But
making up the whole bit about the sacred stone and everything else, and Gil-galad being taken aback, and well, then we will send it with you, and blah blah blah. And then Durin is like,
but
yeah,
you can say like Gil-galad is being very high-handed.
yeah,
Elrond is trying to smooth the waters.
right, right.
Durin absolutely sees this, and it's because Gil-galad has been high-handed, goes, right, I'm going to get one back on you.
He's pranking him. Yeah,
And does the whole thing about the table. And
yeah,
it's this constant negotiation of power dynamics at that table. That
yes,
is actually a really, really good scene.
yeah.
Um, all of the actors did it so well. And you can see the actor playing Gil-galad, and I'm afraid I can't remember his name, but
No.
he plays the being slightly affronted at why, and then how can I do it? And he works his way through it. And you can see there's plans within plans, wheels within wheels, that there's a lot more going on. There are undercurrents to all of this. And this is what gets explored in this whole storyline.
Yeah,
This is the part that I really liked. And I know a number of Tolkien theorists and purists online have gone absolutely nuts about this. They hate this aspect. But Gil-galad approaches Elrond because for some reason the elves are diminishing. And Mithril is going to be the thing that saves them.
because
And
they think
this
it has the
obviously,
light of the Silmaril or something. Yeah, yeah.
and and everyone's going, oh, but this that does it. That's not in it. They've completely lost the plot. And the thing is, I think they're overlooking a couple of really important points. And the first is the point of view of the elves themselves. They, in the first age, living in Valinor, were absolutely immortal. No diminishment, no declination, no reduction. Then they move to Middle Earth. And as we know, the elves are really bad at keeping track of time. And suddenly, like, must be that one of them's woken up one morning and gone, oh, I got a bit of a twinge in my neck, or oh, my knee's a bit sore. That it's suddenly cottoned on that they're not quite who they used to be, but they're not in Valinor anymore. They can't ask the Valar what is happening. And so from their point of view, They don't understand. This has never been explained to them. And we know that Sauron is hiding somewhere and manipulating things.
Right.
And people who have read the Silmarillion know the name Anatar. And
Anatar. Yeah.
one of the people he fools is Celebrimbor. So,
Celebrimbor.
what
Yeah.
do we know about Celebrimbor? Well, first of all, he has this whole plan to get the forge made in the spring.
By the spring.
And one of the lines I was going, what is the hurry? Why is this whole thing?
Yeah.
And then Gil-galad and Celebrimbor turns out were in cahoots to send Elrond to Khazad-dûm to find out about something, but they didn't tell Elrond. They made him a dupe. So
Right.
Celebrimbor manipulates Elrond. Celebrimbor has been talking to Gil-galad. Celebrimbor tells Elrond in this that he has already tested Mithril. Now ask yourself, where did he get the Mithril from?
Celebrimbor.
Because
Where did
where did
Celebrimbor get the myth?
Celebrimbor get the Mithril from?
Dun dun
Because
dun. Yeah.
Elrond got it from Durin as they were mining it. So where did this come from? Where does Gil-galad get the information about Mithril from? Where does Celebrimbor get the sample to test and understand that this light is going to save them? And you go, this sounds very much like preying on someone's fear, twisting it to your own purposes, saying, "Oh, we're slightly lessened. I know
Mhm.
what's going to cure you. You need this special ore that the dwarves have, and you'll be able to turn it and save the elves." Applying Celebrimbor with this plan, this praise, appealing to his arrogance, his desire to out-engineer and outcraft Fëanor, his
Feanor.
desire
Yeah.
to create things of power, to save the elven race. How else are you going to manipulate Celebrimbor? With exactly this story. And once you have Celebrimbor on your side, you don't go and talk to Gil-galad. You get Celebrimbor to do it
Right.
because Gil-galad will trust Celebrimbor.
Celebrimbor.
And suddenly, this web of lies, you can see how it's disseminated. And how is it proven to Gil-galad? Oh, look at the tree. The tree is infected, just the way that the tree in Valinor was.
Right. Right. The Telperion and Laurelin were
And you
destroyed.
go,
Yeah.
and we saw this in the opening, the prologue of episode 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is Morgoth's greatest hits. You go, and who is Sauron? He is Diet Morgoth. He's just going, oh, well, Big Daddy Morgoth did it, so I'll just do the same thing. The elves are going to fall for it again.
What it's really cool though is that there are layers of deception here. So if you're right, you have Anatar somewhere we don't know who he is or where he is yet, but behind the scenes manipulating Celebrimbor, who is coming from a place of I'm going to save, I'm going to do something good, I'm going to create something that helps the elves. So he's not evil, but he's been deceived, and in turn he is deceiving Elrond and manipulating Elrond by saying, you know, I knew your father. And you can see those are moments when he's gaining Elrond's trust, and he's doing it very consciously. Like, oh yes, I remember when your father, you knew my father. Oh, you know, so there's a nice dynamic that they're capturing there.
But you can see the direct manipulation that Celebrimbor, your father, he knew he was the only one who could do it.
Save
And
the world. Yeah,
really, really putting the pressure on Elrond to break his oath.
yeah,
And we know how important oaths are in Middle Earth. This is not, oh, I promise I'll do it for you next week. This is a serious business.
yeah.
And so this is, I think, so well done because when we think of what Celebrimbor had said about the Silmarils, who could have known that story or who would have told him that story about the Silmarils and Morgoth?
Right.
And you go, Sauron might have been there. And then this whole confrontation between, well, I am assuming it's Glorfindel. I am determined that Glorfindel will not be erased from stories from Middle Earth.
You will
That
never
is
see
Glorfindel.
AP. You are never going to see Glorfindel, and you're never going to see the blue wizards. Okay, the blue Astari. They're never going to show. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But we have this story about Glorfindel fighting a Balrog, basically, and it's implied to the death. And you go, well, who witnessed it? It's a story. But how does Gil-galad know it? Celebrimbor told him. How did Celebrimbor know it? He probably got the same information from the same person who told him about the Silmarils. We can see that they all match together as a plan by someone who is manipulating them. And when we think of those stories, obviously there couldn't be any witness to Glorfindel fighting a Balrog, which was brilliant scene. Like that, I might actually have to use that as a screensaver on my computer.
Ah,
Looked absolutely
the
gorgeous.
image. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, tying it into the Silmarils, because that's the thing that's going to manipulate Celebrimbor. Keep telling him about the Silmarils, the greatest thing ever crafted by an elven smith, and go, and you can go one better. That's how you manipulate Celebrimbor. It's not that, oh yeah, that is the Silmaril. Stop. I think people forget that when characters say things, it is
Right.
not necessarily true. It
They
is
could
what
be
they believe.
mistaken or manipulated. Right. Or lying.
And
Any of the above. Yeah.
and when we have a story about how all of these people are going to be manipulated, how their desire to do good, like Boromir, desires to use the ring for good, but we know it will go bad.
Right.
That is what we keep seeing. This is a central theme in Tolkien's work.
Big time.
That this pride, this arrogance, this hubris, it's not because people are mustache twirling villains going, whoa, I'm going to be evil today.
Right.
It's all about manipulation and twisting good to do evil.
Right. Right.
I think so much of that entire sequence with Gil-galad, Elrond, Celebrimbor is so well done. And if I'm right, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it is all horrible writing and they actually think this. That's entirely possible. But if I'm right, and I really do think I'm right, I think a lot of people would have to apologize because this
Well,
is actually really well done and consistent.
I think at the
Um,
very least, people should be a little patient and see where they go with this, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
uh, and there has been, and then that balancing all of this big revelation stuff,
Yeah.
all of these motivations for the elves, balancing all of that with the joke between Elrond and Durin, then
Yeah.
about so and the entire elven race is going to be in your hands. Whose hands? Your hands. Whose hands? And you can see like, and Elrond goes, and again, their genuine friendship. They understand each other. They know that each of them have responsibilities, but their friendship runs deeper than that.
Yeah.
And Durin realizes that Elrond was manipulated because although Elrond said, I was going there for Mithril, even though I didn't know
I
it.
didn't know. Yeah.
And Durin knows that Elrond has been manipulated. He knows that Elrond wasn't trying anything nefarious. And Elrond is his friend. And then the whole thing about the table, and they're laughing about it. And Elrond's not going to tell on him. They're
Right.
taking
Well,
the table.
he even says, "Hey, you need to tell Disa it's from me, okay?" Because and he's like, "No, I'm gonna." What I love about that whole interaction too, and you made it clear as you were discussing it, is how the very proud elves seem to underestimate Durin and the dwarves consistently, and Durin is actually very perceptive. I
Yeah.
love that, and they get that across just beautifully in there. That
And
that's pride again. There's the pride theme all over again.
yeah, because it's not like the elves of the first age under Fëanor didn't have any pride.
Oh my goodness, that's what got them in the whole mess. So yeah,
Or Galadriel going, no, I'm going to set up my own kingdom somewhere.
right,
Pride, pride is part and parcel of the elves. Like they are arrogant. They are high-handed. They do. We have been around forever and we know better than you. They
right,
treat everyone like that. And it's the rare instances of the elves who have befriended the other races. Those are the ones that we know the most
yeah,
because Tolkien wrote about them. But the rest of the elves stick to themselves, and they are like when you think of when the elves meet Frodo at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, which obviously isn't in the film version, but the elves are basically arses to the hobbits. Like
yeah,
they kind of mess them around a bit, and you go, that's not called for.
right,
But elves are high-handed. Elves are arrogant. And I think that's a shock for people when all they remember is Legolas and Gimli and thinking, oh, but the elves are great. That you go,
But even that
not
was
all.
a friendship that didn't exist in the beginning. They didn't like each other in the beginning because elf and dwarf, right? And there was this. It was only an understanding. This is a Tolkien theme, really, isn't it? That the other, the different person, you get to know them and grow respect for them and understand. Ah, okay, I guess I was wrong about this. My assumptions, just because you're a dwarf, my assumptions about you, I guess I was wrong. And that's a friendship that becomes really quite wonderful. A lot of us feel that it's the Legolas Gimli relationship is really special because it grew from that place of distrust and stereotype into a genuine relationship. So
Yeah. So all in all, like I genuinely enjoyed this episode. I think there were about 3 lines of dialogue I didn't like.
okay.
There were some, maybe 4, but there were some really nice transitions between scenes. There was
Huh.
theme work that was consistent all the way through.
Yeah.
There was really close attention paid to the character arcs and development, and paying attention to who is giving information and why they are giving information is
Yep.
suddenly explaining things that I had questions about from earlier on, from earlier episodes. That I can see that stuff was being put in place, and we are incrementally seeing how it fits together and understanding that Sauron is the deceiver. Sauron is a liar and seducer. Explains so much of this that I am genuinely looking forward to where this whole series is going. Not just this season. I'm really excited about this because if they carry on with that depth of awareness of what they are doing and they shore up the deficiencies that I have a problem with,
Hmm.
um, I will be an extraordinarily happy camper. Like genuinely enjoyed this episode, and I don't understand the it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere fast enough. Like we've seen the orcs are coming. There's pressure there. We've seen the fleet of Numenor is heading out. We've seen that Durin and Elrond are progressing the whole building of the forge that's going to lead to this crafting of things. Like everything is in motion. There's constant motion every
Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
and it's building. So I am genuinely enjoying this.
Well, and if you think about most of the books in fantasy that we love, how many of them have these slower beginnings? And there's a lot of this build up and these threads being created that are gradually going to intertwine and maybe converge at the end into this incredible, exciting sequence of action and everything exploding at once. That tends to be, there are lots of names for that no matter the author, right? We call it a convergence in Malazan terms, but there are people talk about a Sanderlanche, right? Or whatever. I mean, that's
Or
the
if
way fantasy often works, is and we
or if you understand narrative structure, climax.
there you go. The word is climax. And this season is building toward, I think, what could really be a very satisfying climax. So, yeah, it'll be exciting to see. Oh, AP. Did you just set me up for that?
Moi?
Oh, look
I,
at the
I,
look
I am perfectly innocent. How
the
dare you
look of
suggest that, Philip?
feigned innocence, Professor Fireballs. All right. Well, thank you very much. This was a really fun discussion, and I will be curious to hear the reactions of our viewers in the comments, of course. And I like you, Em. I'm really looking forward to the next few episodes to see what happens. I have a feeling things are going to ratchet up even more. So we shall see. But in the meantime, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And until next time.